Hello, welcome. We are at Poetry Lockdown, day 33. Um, really excited about today's poet, Denise Levertov. One of the things that I love about reading a poem and talking about a poem every quarantine is that it actually gives me an excuse to read poets that I don't know very well. And Denise Levertov is someone I've always heard about and never really read that deeply myself. And so I was going through the Norton Anthology of American Literature, and kind of came upon her name and was like, oh yeah, I've thought about her poetry and wondered about it. And I read one of her poems, which is my head was taken off, as Emily Dickinson would say of a great poem by one of her poems that I'm going to read, the 90th year. And I thought, let's share this one. And as a shout out, because one of my Facebook friends is a Levertov scholar, I just wanted to point out there's a new book out by Michael P. Murphy. He's the director of the Hank Center at Loyola University, and he's also a Levertov scholar. He published a book with Whip and this year called This Need to Dance, This Need to Kneel. Denise Levertov and the Poetics of Faith looks really good. But I was just going to read just a little bit off the back jacket because I think it intros who she is. It says that Denise Levertov was one of the most pioneering and skilled poets of her generation is beyond dispute. Her masterly use of language, innovative experimentations with organic form, and the political acuity disclosed by her activist poetry, I think especially during the Vietnam War, are well marked by critical communities. But it is also quite clear the poems Levertov wrote in the last 20 years of her life, with their more explicit focus on theological themes and subjects, are among the best poems written on religious experience of any century, let alone the 20th. Wow, that's high praise. And I read that at the outset because I note in my Norton Anthology, which I'm going to read this from, that this poem was first published in 1978, which would fit into that window that Murphy speaks of, right? This window of sort of a turn towards questions of theology and faith. And this poem, if I'm understanding it right, Denise Levertov is writing to her mother, which is something parent-child poems is something I'm really interested in these readings. So without further ado, the 90th year for Laura Segal. And my guess is that is the poet's mother. I don't know that for certain. I haven't dug that deep into the poem. High in the jacaranda shines the gilded thread of a small bird's curlicue of song, too high for her to see or hear. I've learned not to say these last years, "Oh, look, oh, listen, mother," as I used to. It was she who taught me to look, to name the flowers when I was still close to the ground, my face level with theirs, or to watch the sublime metamorphoses unfold and unfold over the walled back gardens of her street. It had not been given her to know the flesh as good in itself, as the flesh of a fruit is good. To her, the human body has been a husk, a shell in which souls were prisoned. Yet from within it, with how much gazing her life has paid tribute to the world's body. How tears of pleasure would choke her when a perfect voice, deep or high, clove to its notes, unfaltering. She has swept the crackling seed pods, the litter of mauve blossoms off the cement path, tipped them into the rubbish bucket. She's made her bed, washed up the breakfast dishes, wiped the hot plate. I've taken the butter and milk jug back to the fridge next door. But it's not my place, visiting here, to usurp the tasks that weave the day's pattern. Now she is leaning forward in her chair, by the lamp lit in the daylight, rereading War and Peace. When I look up from her well-worn copy of The Divine Milieu, which she wants me to read, I see her hand loose on the black stem of the magnifying glass. She's dozing. I am so tired, she has written to me, of appreciating the gift of life. I love that last line. I've talked a lot in these lockdowns about the capacity of poetry to renovate what can be well worn or even cliche. And, of course, that phrase, I'm so tired of fill in the blank. I mean, we don't even really think about what the phrase really means, that we would be thinking about exhaustion. And usually, whatever you're so tired of is something that you're sick of, you don't want to deal with anymore. And to me, that's the opposite of this portrait we have of the mother. She is someone who has spent her whole life raptly engaged and attentive to the things of this world. And to me, the poem bears witness to that, and I'm moved by that attentiveness. Another thing that I often tell my students when I have them write portrait poems of family members is I say, you know what, a good portrait poem is really a double portrait, because in really being attentive and capturing the being of the person that you're doing the portrait of, you reveal a lot about yourself. And I think what's one of the really beautiful things about this poem is you can see that rapt attentiveness in the mother of the poet is absolutely there with the poet herself, who's so attentive to the little details of her mother's daily routine as a 90-year-old. So it's to me, it's just a beautiful, tender, attentive poem. So thank you, Denise Levertov, for this poem. I'll read just the very last stanza and then close out for this Saturday. She has swept the crackling seed pods, the litter of mauve blossoms off the cement path, tipped them into the rubbish bucket. She's made her bed, washed up the breakfast dishes, wiped the hot plate. I've taken the butter and milk jug back to the fridge next door. But it's not my place visiting here to usurp the tasks that weave the day's pattern. Now she's leaning forward in her chair, by the lamp lit in the daylight, rereading War and Peace. When I look up from her well-worn copy of the Divine Milieu, which she wants me to read, it's a book by this Jesuit priest, by the way, I see her hand loose on the black stem of the magnifying glass. She's dozing. I am so tired, she has written to me, of appreciating the gift of life. Thank you, Denise Levertov. Thank you all for listening.